Hi, welcome to Sacred Enzyme. So I'm going to wait here for just a minute and see if anybody wants to pop in and chat today, answer questions, see what everybody's doing, check in with the community. So I'm going to go ahead and start here. I had my first interview today with Guy Anderson. So my first interview ever. I was super excited, probably a little more exuberant than I should have been. And anyway, he's got really good energy. You guys are really gonna like him if you haven't seen him. And his I put his information on the community section with his website. He has a ton of stuff on his website, and it's better if you want to read his books, order his books through his website, because when other people are selling your material, they get a cut, guys. This is why we got to be a community. Everybody's got to work together. Really important. So I have these charts. I got my charts back up. So if anybody wants to talk about these charts, and so I just uploaded a video where I was talking about this timeline and this information, this really interesting information that I found out from listening to Lawrence Gardner. The information is mind blowing. And I ran across all this because I didn't think that I'd actually hear back from Guy Anderson when I asked him if he would like to come on the channel and do an interview. I figured he'd be just like the other millions of people I've already emailed. I've just about given up on trying to talk to anybody or have anybody on the channel because they never answer their emails. And so other content creators, when you take the time to answer emails, that's always a good thing. Don't wait 3 months to answer somebody's emails. It's just rude. If you're going to give your email address, at least be responsible for the email. There's nothing worse than people that you can't depend on. And we have to be able to depend on each other. Otherwise, we're never going to embody the 13th archetype. So if we're not all working together for the best of humanity, and what's the point? You're just tangled in the false matrix. So I guess I'll just go ahead and start talking, since I may as well record this, and then as people pop in, we'll be carrying on a thread. But I want to talk about one of the things that I was really interested in, what Guy Anderson had to say about the reset in the United States. And it was when America, or the 13 colonies, or whatever you wanted to call it, or colonial America, that was when colonial America became incorporated. So when it became incorporated is when the reset was. So there's so many different things that I want to talk about with you guys. I mean, there's so much stuff. I wish I had an assistant, truthfully, because there's like so much stuff that we could talk about to really have really good content, good conversations that are productive. So I'll just tell you some of the things that I've been mulling over. So for some reason, I keep getting downloaded. Well, I don't know what's happening, but either somebody that's in a higher dimensional realm is able to manifest books for me when I go to the library, because I'll just wake up one day and I'll be like, you need to go to the library. So I'll go to the library, and I always look at the used book section, because I've been building a library for a while. People, if you've never seen the Book of Eli, the movie, The Book of Eli, I recommend you going and watching the Book of Eli, because it's pretty amazing how the Book of Eli is very predictable of what might happen. Is that there was one library left, because all the information gets destroyed. And just like when the power grid goes down, how's anybody going to know how to do anything if everybody dies? Hopefully you'd find a book or something, a clue. I mean, this is what we've been doing right now, right? We've been finding all of these clues from the past, and it's like hitting our memory banks. Like, and we're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wait a minute. I mean, 20 years ago, you could have never said, hey, you could have never said 20 years ago that about Germany, that was not what it seemed to be. So how you doing? So yeah, so one of the things that I've been mulling over lately is why they burnt these courthouses in the southern part of the United States, but they didn't burn them up in the northern part of the United States. Anybody have any thoughts on that? This huge audience we got in here? I'm not sure why, but I did a list of all the courthouses that got burnt down. When I started doing my genealogy was in 2001, so there was a data bank that was in Ancestry. So pretty much everything that I built on my family is what's in the database because I supplied most of it. They had my great grandfathers being dead as a child. Oh, I just got a thump on my watch. So I guess we just got the dynamic duos in. So I thought, well, that's strange because he obviously didn't die. I wouldn't be here. And so I started trying to figure out what happened. So anyway, they had made errors on the censuses. So on the censuses, I had to do amendments to it, and I had to prove my documentation and everything so they could change it, amend it. Well, I couldn't find the one for, it was 1890. The 1890 census is totally gone. There's nothing for 10 years. So they only do the census every 10 years. And so when you're researching, you're going in 10-year increments, basically, unless they didn't live off grid and they had like, you could have their post office box number or whatever would show up, and otherwise the census was only done every 10 years. So literally from 1880 to nothing to 1890, and then nothing to 2000. So there was nothing. Hey, there was nothing for 20 years. So I mean, can you imagine if you were doing a reset? You could hide a lot of stuff in 20 years, right? And then one of the things, oh wow, something just flew through my room. A thing of light. Holy smokes, I thought a bird flew through the room. That is crazy. Wow, I hope I see that again. That was crazy. Did you see it? Did you see the thing fly through the room? Wow, that was wild. And it's not the crystal on my watch because it's going over here. That is crazy. I literally saw something fly out of the wall, come across, go through this lampshade and go out the window. That's so cool. So anyway, I just thought it was really interesting, and there's nothing for 20 years because these courthouses got burnt. So the question is what records were being kept in these states? So I printed up a list of states that had the highest regions or had documented warehouse burns. So let's see, the biggest places were Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And then there were some that were burned in Virginia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Florida. And then there were mixed states that were county specific, which I thought was really interesting. County specific. What was it that was going on in those counties that made them specific that they needed to be burnt, right? So it says Kentucky, Missouri, Texas, Maryland, and West Virginia. That's okay. That's okay. Feel free to chime in. So anyway, there were no records were burnt down in courthouses in Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So I'm wondering what was going on in those southern states that they had to hide. I know one of the things that just kind of came to me when I was thinking about that was, what if these courthouses that were in the South had records or had something to do with records from when the French owned these territories. Because I started looking up, well, how was it that the French had all this land here in the United States before it was the United States, right? Why was it France? Why did they have to make the Louisiana Purchase? You know, why all that? Didn't seem, it's something's not right about that. You know, my spidey senses going off. So then I start looking and I'm like, okay. So if we follow this bloodline thing, right, that I've just been learning, this Rex Dues stuff, if you're following that bloodline, you find out that Rollo was given Normandy in the year 911. And then you had the Vikings that merged with the French. Okay. So you had, they became French, remember? Because that was the biggest thing about the other Vikings that were coming down. They were, you know, they were clashing with Rollo because they didn't want to change. And he was like, yes, you know, we need to stay here. But you have to remember what the real story was that they were all having to leave out of these areas because they were running out of resources, because these areas were destroyed in the climate shift. So they were all having to squeeze in between this band of 30 to 60 degrees on the planet. And then they deforested everything else because they had to build boats and everything to get to the middle section. You know, a lot of these people were up in all this glacial runoff. So they were looking for resources because they were all like starving to death. So you basically had this cataclysm that was created on the planet. And then if we go back to this information that we just found out about from Lawrence Gardner about these two brothers here, this is basically Enlil causing chaos of humanity. And so this is why we have these cycles that we have. We're in a power struggle all the time. So it's really interesting that we're basically living in the middle of a family squabble. So we have to come from these primordial lines. And if we've got 3 different lines here, we actually, well, let me see here. Let me go back and look at my notes because, boy, this gets really confusing. Okay, so we've got Inky, which means archetype. Can you believe that? Inky means archetype. All the stuff we've been talking about, these archetypes, it's Inky. He's the one that's downloaded all these archetypes into my brain. All right. Eve belongs to pre-Adamic royal priestess lines. She is associated with the life bearer genetics. This is the primordial mother. This is who we've been doing all this stuff for, is Eve. Okay. This is all the stuff that I remember about these red priestesses and stuff and living in these places. It's all these timelines. Okay, so she is associated with life bearer genetics, wisdom transmission, and continuity. Okay, so Inky is her companion. She was the first, they manufactured this vessel, right? This is probably what Theo was telling me. We said that one time we were one being and then we went into 2. So she became his companion. So he fell in love with his creation, pretty much. So he created her and then he married her because she's a biological computer, just like this transhumanistic type thinking stuff, right? But they forget about the soul. They're forgetting about the Venus principle. So Inky was a Sumerian god of wisdom, water, creation, and as presented, a royal progenitor, not a god in the later religious sense, but a dynastic patriarch. So we're just saying that these people came from higher dimensional space. Higher dimensional space. Okay, so he says that Eve is aligned with Inky's lineage, the wisdom line, not Adam's. Eve plus Inky equals the Adonai. These are the wisdom life bearer lines. Eve is aligned with Enki, the bringer of wisdom, water, cultivation, and continuity. Seed banks, farms, working with water, activating sacred nodes, all this stuff. This line is agricultural, city building, knowledge bearing, sovereign through continuity. These are the Tartars, Tartarians, right? The Tartarians. Two bloodlines come together. This is why she looks Asian. She's the Tartar, right? So this reframes the serpent that is Enki's symbol as protector of knowledge, and Eve's temptation as initiation, not disobedience. So one of the other things that he talks about is the sacred rites that they did a long time ago in the beginning. And this is the manna and all this stuff. What this was they were drinking the menstrual blood from the mother, from Eve, and from her daughters that had the celestial blood. So they drank it. They made it into elixir because that was the waters of life, right? If you think about it, it's the life waters. So they were keeping, this was the fountain of youth. So basically, this is how they're able to live for all this time. This is why they drink the blood. It's supposed to be from the chalice, the holy chalice. So this explains what's going on in this timeline with the harvesting. Okay? Yeah. So, I mean, we've gotten really, really far into polarity. Big time. So, then he says that Adam was not Eve's primary partner. Adam's line was tied to a different genetic and dynastic stream, and his wife is Lilith. So Adam was married to Lilith. Do you remember when I was saying that I kept remembering? I kept remembering when there was a mismatch in the pairings, and that Lilith was supposed to be Adam's companion, not Eve. I knew it was wrong. Yep. That Eve she was a creation, so maybe it's Lilith that we see. I don't know. So I still got to unscramble all this. So then we get time of the lily. This is what this means. It's because of Lilith, right? Yeah. They're lilies of the valley. They have the holy chalice. So both of these women basically have the holy chalice. But they're also holding polarity as well. Okay, so Adam is with Lilith. Lilith is erased by demon, being a demon, and Lily survives as a symbol. Fleur de lis on the France stuff, right? Adam equals separate Adamic line. So Gardner links Adam to a different tradition associated with Enlil, Jehovah. It's a line focused on obedience and rule by command. This is the lion bloodlines. So Adam is a separate Adamic line, and he's married to Lilith, or she is his consort, is what they call it, and they had kids. So we had different bloodlines. So we've got Adam is being associated with the Jehovah bloodline that the Jewish people chose. And they also call that like Shadiah or something like that. Shadiah. So the bloodline of King David goes through Jesus. That's the lion bloodlines. The Lion of David. So this bloodline is Adam's bloodline. It's Adam's. And Adam was with Lilith. So it's interesting. So you have to think about it like that. And then you think, okay, well, if Enki, hello, if Inky was with was paired up with Eve, right? And they had children together and they created a bloodline. All right. And then we have Adam actually being paired up with Lilith, right? And then we know that Lilith was demonized, but this is his wife came from what Gardner calls the dragon families. So Lilith was dragon bloodline. Okay, so let's write this down. Lilith is dragon. And I don't know at this point what Adam's was, because it just says that Adam was an older Adamic line. So we got to find out where the origins are of Adam. So I got to get this guy's book. First I'm going to see if I can find out thrift books. But yeah, I'm going to get it. So we've got Eve with Enki. And this is the Adonai. And then we've got Lilith with Adam. And she was part dragon bloodlines. So what was Adam's, right? So we got Adam with a question mark. And then we've got, okay, so we got Eve and Enki, Eve, Enki. And so with Eve and Enki, we've got like these this water stuff. Remember when we were talking about the people having memories from being from the water planets? Yeah, see, this is your cell memories from these timelines. So we've got Eve belonging to a pre-Adamic royal priestess line. So the question is where did Eve come from? Did Eve come from Venus? I think Eve came from Venus, guys. What do y'all think? Where do you think that Eve came from? I think she came from Venus, and that right now they're in Procyon, and it has something to do with the precession of the equinox, and when Polaris lines up exactly on the poles is when everything clicks in with the clock on the last, like our last increments before we get ready to go for like major changes. But she comes 28 times in one full cycle on the clock. Like if we talk about one full entire 360 however many thousand years is one cycle, when it gets like to the end is when it really starts clicking in. All the numbers start lining up and we start having all these things happening. Because if you remember, I don't know if I did a video on this or not, but archangels are basically, you have to remember that where we're at is the only thing that's pixelated. You know, like there are beings that can go in and out of this space because they can be like the animation that's behind pixelization, right? They don't have to pixelate to be in other realms that are higher vibrational spaces. So when they come into this dimension, they have to pixelate into something, basically, because we're in a hologram. We think about it like that. So if they pixelate in this dimension, they take form. This is why archangels look the way that they do. This is why Lilith looks a certain way, unless they created the avatar, which they did. They made him look like this, right? So Eve, she probably already looked like this. Maybe this is the story I've heard before about how you had this princess that came from these one royal houses in the Pleiades, and she wanted to do this duality experiment, and she'd been watching it from the higher realms. And I don't know if she was watching a mortal or what, or if he was stuck in three-dimensional space because he had chose to embrace the dark aspect of polarity, because you can choose to do either one, right? This is what the checkerboard floor is all about. So then she decided she fell in love with him. And so we had a bloodlines, and I think that was Procyon. That's why a lot of us have memories of our lupine bloodlines coming from Procyon, where they have the original werewolf form comes from. Where these are This is what their form looks like in pixelization because they have an archetype, right? The archetype is what that soul expression is. Like, I know I protect children at all costs, at all costs. And I do this in other realms too. I do this in other realms too. It's all about protecting children. It has to do with Venus, and it has to do with this star system of Procyon that has these canines, because this is one of the things that I've been told by. She doesn't tell me what her name is. She just told me that she was the mother of Earth and that I came from her. So if she was the mother of Earth, is she Eve? Is she Eve? Who is she? And somehow or another, she's associated with the wolf bloodlines. And so I think that she's from Procyon. I think that Eve originally came from Venus. But as all the stuff started coming across the system, there was malware throughout the universe. You had these groups that were coming in, they were pixelating, they were embracing the dark side, and they got where they enjoyed it too much, and the whole system got out of balance. And so Earth, I think that if we go through time cycles where the planet has to ascend or descend, whatever frequency band it's going to weigh out to when we get to the cycle, how many people are waking up, how many people are doing grid work, how many people are getting prepared, how many people are building their ark. The ark is not literally hammering together a boat, but it does probably going to be beneficial to live in between the 30 and 60 degree band, truthfully, because these are the safe zones in the past. And I've done like a lot of research on this. They were definitely the safe zones. Like, this is where all the the stone circle structures like Stonehenge, like Göbekli Tepe, these other places, Machu Picchu, these places were all in this, they had these stone circles, because if you think about it, when we had the cataclysm, right, and people had to force together, a lot of people died. First, they tried to survive right where they were, and then they were like, oh, we got to get the fuck out of here. We're not going to be able to make it, right? At this time, they probably desperate. So they're all trying to get into this in-between space. And I'm sure they were fighting, because the people were there like, get out of here, right? This is our little nest egg, right? And then the people were like, no, you don't have a choice. I got a mouse to feed. I got a wife. I have a legacy. I wonder if Venus is an energetic waypoint for Procyon. I think so. And I think the interesting thing that you say, you talk about that is, if you notice, a lot of people in the SSP community, they don't know anything about the wolf bloodlines. So I think that they're existing in a higher dimensional space. But they do rescues. They rescue humans that are being abducted. I've had a few stories I've run across. I've had a few stories that I've run across where people are talking about being like being abducted or something, and then the walls just like burst open, and then there are like upright walking, like shepherd looking dogs, wolf dogs in suits with guns and stuff, and they rescue them. So I think that it is in a higher dimensional band. Also like Venus, because a lot of people in SSP say, oh, there's nothing left of Venus, but that's not true. There's a 7th dimensional space that's there, because that's where my grandmother is. So, it really does make sense that it would be like a lateral band, because they're all energetic gates, right? But if you're in a higher dimensional space, you can't really have people getting into your energetic gates. See, this is one of the things that they keep doing with CERN and all these other things, is that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to basically get like to the 13th heaven where source is. It's just like in that show, Time Travelers, where they were agents and they were jumping back in time. This is literally like that shit. And then they have the Eve come back, and she's Asian, right? And she reports to an AI computer, though. So then you realize, okay, they're in the false matrix, right? They're trying to go back and change it. And so but Source is a quantum computer, I guess, basically, if you would want to kind of label it as something, because you can't really measure it, because it's in absolutely everything. It's everything that exists has to be with Source. It's all part of Source. I mean, there's a million different pieces of Source in your body, right? And they all work just right. So the heart doesn't want to be the leg. and the liver doesn't want to be the heart, right? They'd all be all fighting over who's going to do what. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you start breaking everything down. So we've got manifestation of form in this dimensional space. So all of these angelic beings that come from these higher realms, they have to manifest into some kind of form. So it takes whatever the archetype is. So this is why you've got these symbols of these different archetypes. You got Lilith, which is dragon. And, you know, these dragon bloodlines, they've been around for a long time. You know, we kind of figured that it was the dragon bloodlines first, right? Because these archangels manifest as dragons. So that's their archetype, right? Because just like in Stranger Things, that's the other thing. We could talk about this for days, is that Stranger Things is the first scene out the gate when 11 escapes. She runs to the diner and the guy calls and he says, yeah, I got this kid here, da 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 da. Yeah, Randolph Lane. Yeah, Randolph. That's what he says. Okay, Randolph, Wolf Shield. This is the Lupine Protector bloodline. This is why my family's line's Randolph. And see, that's another whole, I just got a thump from Theo. That's a whole nother thing that we got to talk about, is we got to talk about this reset. And I think that the Tartarians were alive and well, and they were hiding in plain sight. I do. I think it was the Randolphs, because I started going back and reading all these letters and stuff again. I've been like reading like crazy, listening to audiobooks like crazy this week, because I didn't want to sound stupid when I was having my first interview. You know, I wanted to make sure I knew everything that I should know. So I've been just like cramming books and all this stuff on Audible and reading, doing research at like 3 o'clock in the morning. So I'm thinking, okay. So I end up finding all this stuff about these bloodlines. Well, we've kind of, you know, and I've had a lot of stuff brought to me in astral, and then you guys put in your little puzzle pieces too. And this is why it's so important for us to have. Awesome. I'm glad you're going to New Grange. Make sure that you do some work there. Take a few heirloom seeds with you. 60, that's really good, because, you know, this is what we're here for love. It looks like a pregnant mother. This is going to be a special year for you. Yes, and definitely owls. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just got a thumb on my watch. That's crazy. But yeah, so we know that there were bloodlines here that were here from before. And some of them had the ability to shapeshift, right? They did, because they had celestial or higher vibrational blood. And so this can segue into what was happening that now has been turned upside down, right? Is that what used to be a sacred rite, because the chalice, the Holy Grail, is blood. Okay, so these original star mothers that had the higher vibrational blood, think about this. They would take that blood, and one drop has the same vibration and frequency as a whole gallon. Okay, they mix their menstrual blood into wine, and then everybody does their communion. This was to keep people from aging, being sick, and all this. This was celestial waters of life. So this is what the communion really is, guys. And so the interesting thing is that this professor, this British historian and professional genealogist, now he's been all through the actual research that belongs to the aristocracy's own archives and all of the heraldic records. He had access to stuff that nobody had. And so he has accurate information, and this stuff has never been disputed, so, which is interesting, right? He's shadow banned pretty much. So we've had bloodlines that were already here. We had these bloodlines that were already here. It was just that they were getting through cycles. They were going through time cycles, right? Because we have these two brothers that are fighting over the planet. We have these two energy forces that are fighting over this planet. And because it's pixelated in a 3-dimensional space, they're like actual people actually fighting over actual humans. Right? Think about it. So if we're interactive members of this whole crescendo, how do we fit in here? Okay, I talk about color theory quite a bit because we've got, if you have ever had black hair and you want to go platinum blonde, if you don't go to a professional and get it done, you'll end up with carrot orange hair. You'll have red hair. So the halfway point between black and white is red. So this is what the red thread is all about. The red thread is being the 13th archetype that's holding the middle between darkness and light. So if that's the case, were the Tartar people actually the red threads, and that they had figured the game out on Earth? That if you maintain balance, in this three-dimensional spectrum, that there's like nothing you can't achieve, right? Because they were totally balanced. This is why they had to go. Because they knew how to work with the nature of the planet. They had the knowledge. They were knowledge holders. They were Tartar Aryans. They'd come out of the higher dimensional bands. After the reset, they could come out. Because the planet the vibration had been reset. This is what the cataclysms are for. It breaks up the crystalline structure. So everything can reform. Game's over. Remember the game, please don't break the ice. You keep hitting out the cubes until the whole thing fell through. You have to have a little hammer to break it up. In the end, you got to break up all the ice, right? That's where all the emotion's at. So in this three-dimensional pixelated spectrum, are we actually letting like literal creatures loose? Probably. This is lots of archetypes, right? So it's interesting. So let's have some conversation. Any questions? Anybody got any new information that you want to share with the community? Any stories? So what's for dinner? What's for dinner? Takiyash Tak. I'm gonna just call you Taki. What's for supper? What are you making? So next month, New Grange. Next month, February what? When's your birthday? If you tell me it's on the 17th, I'm gonna fall out of this chair right now. So a couple of things that I've run across, that there's a lot of sightings of cryptids. It's 27th. Wow. Well, we'll see what happens on the 17th, right? That's the solar lunar new year. And there's an eclipse that day. And the Olympics is going on that day. So, I've talked about this a little bit, of what I've been told about the Olympics. That there's going to be set off there. So let's hope it doesn't happen. Your brother's birthday's on the 17th. You guys are in the programs. Have you ever looked at the SSP programs? You guys are in them. That's a key indicator. Everybody's born about the same day. My brother and I are 10 days apart too. 3 years and 10 days. And we're all separated by like 14, 15 months. It's a big clue. Is your brother still living? Oh yeah. We've always started out as strange ducks, for sure. That's okay. We're being understood right now, right? At least we all got each other. That's the way I look at it. And usually it's the females that get pulled into these programs because we carry the maternal codes, right? And this is one of the things that I started finding out is that a lot of these people that are in these programs come from like these same bloodlines that I do. And one that I traced back was Penny Bradley. She said that she came from the Bruce family and that she had like four strings back to that family. And so I was looking up like what's the common denominator between Penny and I if she comes from the Bruce family, because how I tie into the Bruce family is different than everybody. See, Robert Bruce's mother was married before. All they did is get married for power. Well, she was married to this guy named Adam of Kilkendar, and he was one of the Clan Macduffs from Ireland. They were old Gaelic line. Well, you know what? A lot of people that use substances, it's because they're in the programs and they don't cooperate in the other realms. Truthfully, this is what it is. And so they get punished the fuck out of in this timeline. I've heard a lot of people talking about that. Yep. So when you have somebody that's in your family that's an addict or whatever, it's really important to wake them up or try to wake them up to, like, you know, he probably had a lot of sleep disturbances as a child, like night terrors, have problems sleeping, bad dreams, over imaginative. Like my son, oh my goodness, and he's a twin. And out of my twins, he couldn't sleep. He had a sensitive stomach. Yeah, he always was having night terrors. My son was like hanging off the bed, screaming, reaching in a hole, screaming, "Mommy, grab my hand!" He's like rescuing me in other timelines. It was terrible. I couldn't wake him up. He'd be running all over the house. It's rough. It's rough. And I knew something right then was wrong. And then my daughter, as soon as she started talking, she told me I wasn't her mother. She told me her mother was from China. And yeah, and my son and I have both been astral attacked at the same time in concession. I came home from the hospital and something attacked me in my bed, and it looked like a big, disgusting bug. And it had these huge claws and these long teeth, had all this slobber coming out, and it was like gobbling and cackling. Oh, it was awful. And he was sitting right on top of me. He was going like this, trying to get in my incision. I couldn't move. I was like frozen. All I could do was like scream in my head astrally. And I was like, God help me, God help me. And then I heard, Stacy, say the power of Christ compels you. I started saying that at the thing astrally, right? I'm projecting it at him. Third time I say, the power of Christ compels you. The corner of my room, the whole ceiling lifted away. And I seen this huge hand come in and pull it right off me like this, went and threw it right behind its hand, and I seen it go all the way out into the ether. Like the whole ceiling, I turned black in the corner. I could see stars and everything. That thing just went flying. It just kept flying, 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 like it was never going to get to the end of it. The hand went out and the ceiling went back. And I was like, oh my God. And then I called my husband in there. I'm like, oh my God, I just had this thing attack me. He's like, oh, Stacy, you're just having sleep paralysis. I'm like, oh no, this was real. Well, then, like 30 minutes later, my son's screaming from his bedroom. And finally get him woke up. And he's like, there's black monsters all around his bed, and they're biting his hands and toes, fingers and toes. Now, there's that. We need to put the image of that thing with the diagram that you shared with me on the energy zones. So one of the channel members, she shared with me this chart, because when I have a rough night in astral, I'll wake up and my right elbow will hurt. And I know I'm being stuck by a needle and I'm being like sedated. And they go right into my elbow channel, like literally in through the bone right here. And I'm telling you what, my arm will ache all day. And look at all the bruises I have. I woke up with bruises all over me. And they're usually always around my wrist. Yes, the 13 ghost points. That's right. We need to put that on the channel so people can look at that, because I don't think a lot of people realize that when they're in astral or when they're here and they're having symptoms, right? And a lot of people run to the doctor with head pains, this pains, that pains, but they really need to be protected in their field. Yeah. So what I suggest is that since, we've all of this information's come to light, I prayed about this. I think this is why I found this. I said, God, please don't let me screw up this interview, and please don't make me make a fool of myself and this guy think that I'm just crazy as a lunatic. I said, please just tell me what you think would be a good thing for me to talk about, right? Talk about with this guy that'll be on his level. You know, he's wrote books. I've not written any books, so he's a pretty smart individual. You know, and so I was like, just, kind of, and this is when I found out about this stuff. So I'm like, you know what? It's time. It's time that we all start working to embrace the 13th archetype. We have to. We have to, so, we really, everybody's got to work with the planet. And like Guy Anderson said that like 20% of the people are even awake and aware that 80% are literally juvenile souls that have no clue. Like they're going through the recycling bin. Basically, like on the map of the Amenti Gates that has souls of the slain marked on it. It's almost like this is where they're going to collect all of the souls and recycle them through, which is interesting. Let me see where it says on here. Souls of the slain. It's down here in South America. It's above Argentina. And it's below, looks like Bolivia. So there's a site right here. I hope you guys can see this. Let me try to. Right where I'm pointing, it says Souls of the Slain. And it's on this latitude line where my finger's at that goes up. This is where the apocalyptic points are on here. So yeah, I know. When you know, right, you don't trust doctors, period. You're just like, yeah, it's like you feel like, what is going on here? None of them know about nutrition. That's the craziest thing. You would expect for a doctor to know that a patient that has a bad heart shouldn't be on blood thinners where they can't eat any fruits and vegetables. Are you trying to kill them? Like, I'm surprised that my dad has been alive this long. He literally can't eat any fruits and vegetables. And he's 86 years old. And he needs to eat. He grew up eating fruits and vegetables. But you know what? He's bloodline. My dad's a bloodline. He's definitely from the lion bloodlines because he's got thick blood. I think that the dragon bloodlines that we have higher copper and less iron. We're iron low. We're iron deficient. Oh, okay. Well, if you have it, it should have it on there. But I think that there's actually a lot more points and a lot more stargates. There's actually like 700 and something now. So I don't know if she has a revised Stargate map. Do you know if Ashiana? I don't think she's going by Ashiana Dean anymore. I think she changed her name again. What's she going by now? Do you know her new work? Oh, okay. I wonder if, well, you know what? She did have a new set of courses coming out because her ex-husband, Phil Gruber, was teaching the Keylontic material. He's been mentoring, but lately he's been like going through a really bad funk. And I had thought about going back and joining the classes, but see, they only teach a 12 by 12 system. They don't teach about the 13 system, which is where we need to go back to. We got to go back to the lunar, the primordial template. Like, see, this is what we got to do. And see, all of these systems, you can tell that they all have motives, right? They all have motives because they only give you so much. They only give you so much. They don't tell you how to get out of it. They just tell you what it's about. It's like, how about a solution, right? How about a solution? What are we supposed to be doing? What's our purpose here, right? So it's like you kind of wonder, is it they've just kind of left it to see if we were going to have a light bulb moment and wake up, right? I don't know. I wonder. I wonder if it's all planned to wake everybody up. Just like all of the clone kids from the Cabbage Patch. I mean, maybe they're really sleeper agents. Think about it. Some of us are sleeper agents, obviously. Some people like had their awakening, right? That's what they call them, awakening. So you're like a sleeper agent. You're a sleeper agent until you get activated. Some people didn't have their activation until they were like in 2012 or 2020. That's your activation. You had to, right. So we're all really just sleeper agents, truthfully, when you think about it. Because if this is a biological computer, right? They created this biological computer. This is why we're on Earth, because Earth is number 8, and it's an alloy of all the metals, because you've got the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. They all have an element. Like Venus is copper, Mars is iron, Mercury is mercury. The moon is quicksilver, the sun is gold, right? All of these things exist here and on Earth because we're number 8. So we're basically like that statue that they talk about in Daniel. Like the part at the top was this, and it comes down, it was bronze, and it was this and that. It doesn't say it was copper in it, though. It just says that it got smashed by something that came from not of this earth. It smashed it, and it was all crumbled at the bottom to the feet, right? It's because all the old is getting crashed down, and we got to bring Venus back. We got to bring the 5 back into the equation. Like they used to say that the primordial family template was 2 boys, 1 girl. And the reason it is because boys carry Mars energy. So you have 4 plus 4 is 8. And then 5, Venus, the 5-pointed star, equals 13, the archetype. The 13th archetype, which is Inky. The word Inky means archetype. So Inky is basically an archetype. He is these archetypes on the wheel. He's the archetype. So he must be the architect of this reality. Think about it. And we have different bloodlines. We have different solar systems or whatever, different celestial beings that are involved in this experiment. And then we had different prototypes, right? They had to start it. Okay. All right, for sure. So if you think about it, if they're taking archetypes, I lost my train of thought there. I was reading her message. So we're basically going through an embodiment of archetypes to take the time cycle through the clock to the finish line. So we've got to embody, and we've got to embody all of it and be in the middle. So we have to be the red thread. We have to be the red. Just like these Buddhist monks have been walking across the country for the Walk for Peace, they're tying little red threads on people's wrists. And I was like, okay, this is what they're doing. They're lighting up the nodes on the planet. And they're making people become the red thread, right? Because they're standing for peace. Because, if everybody just decides, I'm not doing this. Who gave you the right? And who gave you the right? And who thinks you are right? We have to stop thinking like that. We have to think about, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong. We're just not living this way. We choose not to, right? We choose to exist in a different reality. And we have the opportunity to ascend the planet. We really do. Because, when you know what to do to keep the 3-dimensional space locked in one way or another, see, that's what was with the Tartars. They had mastered balancing polarity. And so, this is where all these beautiful buildings come from. And then you have to think about it, okay, well, if they had balanced polarity, then they knew all about the dark and the light. So were they traversing in between each? So is this why these churches, you're able to go into lower gates and higher gates? Think about it. I mean, everybody had to play a role once in a while. How else would you keep this whole shindig going? You have to have polarity all the time. Otherwise, it would just fall flat, right? So, I mean, it makes you wonder. So, we just had an upgrade on the form. Originally, we took our archetype. We had dragons and all kind of crazy looking creatures, what we think are creatures. It's in animal forms and insect forms and everything. Now they're just shrunk down to a little tiny size. But these archetypes come from somewhere. It's an archetype out in the universe. And then when it comes into three-dimensional space and pixelates, we get a cockroach, we get a spider, we get, this is why a lot of people see like spider looking technology that gets pulled out of their nose or whatever. It looks like spider because that's the archetype, right? It stalks, it spies, it's a pixelated reality. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like, in the show Stranger Things, when they take her down, the one kid, Mike, he rescues 11, right? And he puts her down and lets her stay in the basement because she's hiding. So he's trying to get her name. And he says, Mike, I'm Mike, short for Michael, right? And she says, 11. And he's like, 11, he's thinking in his head, that's pretty screwed up that they call her 11, right? He says, we'll call you L. So then you think, okay, I get this. Mike IL, right? Together they create a real hot band. Right, because they're together they balance each other out. Because 11, she's over emotional, right? Because she's been traumatized. She's like all this power. And Mike, he's the direction. He's getting her focused. He's keeping her from going just ape shit crazy. No, Al, you gotta sit here. You can't leave the room, Well, maybe he recognized your soul as being a red thread. Well, now in this inversion timeline, I think it might mean something else. It might mean you got some good blood. But there's still good people left. There's still good people left. Just because we've had all this stuff that's come forward about the Catholic churches and church establishment doesn't mean that every single church member is bad, right? They still do a lot of good things. There's some people that are really in it for the heart. And you know what? If it hadn't been for those people there, nobody would go, right? The nefarious people wouldn't be able to do what they do. But see, they do it under the guise of fooling people to think that they're good. So you're going to have good and bad in everything. This is why it's important for us to have discretion, right? If you felt at 12 years old that you met a monk. I thought it said priest. I'm sorry. I was thinking it was a Catholic priest. In France, you said France. That threw me off. A monk in France. Okay. Well, that's an honor. He probably seen your that you were for peace early on. They could see to the field. So, they're tapped in. They've been doing something there a long time, and it's worked, obviously, right? They're still there. Well, baptizing, basically all that was cleaning your energy field. And, the other thing that this researcher talked about that has access to all this information, he was talking about how John the Baptist and Jesus were related, and that John the Baptist comes from the bloodline of King Solomon and the Ethiopian Sheba, Queen of Sheba. That's where John the Baptist's bloodline came from. So their son Malachite, I think is what his name is, Malachite, the child of Solomon and Sheba, was that bloodline of John the Baptist. And so this is why you see Jerusalem coming out of Axiom, because John taught Jesus. John was Jesus's teacher. He baptized him. He cleaned his field, right? This is why when he came up out of the water, he saw a bird, because his energy field had been purified. And it was because everything is purified in the living waters, right? Mother's womb, the holy chalice, right? So, yeah, they were doing blood rites because Jesus's family, that bloodline, did that. They did blood rites. They did communion. That's what their communion was. They were drinking menstrual blood because it was from the higher dimensional beings. And so it was reverse your aging, help you live a long time, keep you from being sick. And, they did have a practice where a lot of the Cathars that didn't need to have, they didn't need to have blood transfusions like a lot of people did from these dragon bloodlines, because you're copper heavy. You're copper heavy, and I think it's because you're from Venus, right? It makes your alloy is heavier from your system. So if Eve came from Venus, she would have been copper heavy, and she would have needed to have iron, right? She would have been iron deficient. So it would make sense that she would have people here that were willing to graciously donate their blood to her. And so a lot of these people were the Cathars because they were the Essenes, and they practiced Gnosticism. So, this is Jesus's line. He went into the Essenes and he became a Nazarene. And a Nazarene was just a type of a spiritual teacher. He wasn't from Nazareth. He was just a Nazarene. So Jesus was from these bloodlines. He was from these bloodlines. So you've got these different family bloodlines that are just acting out everything on the earth right now. And it all goes back to Enki and his brother Enlil. And I think that we pretty much have realized that Enlil is controlling the planet, that he has all of these lion bloodlines, the Trump, all of our politicians. This is Illuminati stuff, whatever you want to call it. This is these bloodlines. These are these bloodlines of Enlil. And then right now we're in the Leviathan contract. So the contract on the planet is changed, and we're in the Leviathan, which is a water contract. So I think that would mean that it's a time for the contract to change hands from Enlil back to Enki. So I guess the question is how does the toilet get flushed? How does the toilet get flushed? And who gets flushed off the toilet? Is it maybe the reason that we're awake and aware is because we're to know what's coming, so we can position ourselves to go through it, ride the wave? Yes, this is what I think. This is what I think. Some people were just born already knowing. Most people that are on this platform right here, you were born awake and aware. So, you've been getting this kind of information your whole life. Your whole life. You know right now that I'm here for this moment. All that I went through makes sense because it was supposed to be for right now. And this is why I say, are we sleeper agents? I think so. I think that we're sleeper agents and that we're here. And you know what? A lot of planning involved in soul contracts and other things in other realms to be able to bring all of these people in. So they had to go through certain bloodlines so they could inhabit the soul. So this is why if you feel like you don't belong in your family, it's because you needed that DNA for your soul expression, So you have to come in what's going to fit the avatar. You got to take what's going to fit you. Kind of like when you go shopping at the last minute for something fancy thing, right? And then you only have a couple outfits. They only have like 3 dresses in your size. And you're like, oh, great, right? You can't be too choosy at this point. You got to take what's going to fit. So, yeah. And sometimes these avatar suits still don't fit. And so they have to be brought in increments. Like, some comes in at 7, some comes in at puberty, some come in at 22, some come in at 33. So it comes in increments. So you can get your full expression, right? And maybe this is why, that our reproductive cycles are the way they are, right? When you're young and dumb, right? You don't have that much going on. You can reproduce. You need to focus on reproduction, legacy, right? But oh yeah, I'd love to see that. So I'm going to read this for the video. The blue skin gods were silicon-based life forms with copper blood, like octopus and mollusks. It's more oxygenated and supports the immortality gene switch. I'll send you my research on it. So that's interesting. When we get that, we'll share that with the channel. And thank you. So let's talk about that little thread there. So so that would make sense that why they would be only contacting 20%, right? And the rest of them are not going to wake up. So maybe we just have the immortality gene, and maybe this is why, that they started cloning these Tartarian kids, because these Tartar Aryan kids had two different bloodlines, right? Think about this. They have two different bloodlines, and these bloodlines kept them balanced because they had dragon and they had like the lion, but then you've got this other third, right? Because it looks like a chimera of three different things. It looks like an eagle, a dragon, and a lion. So we're talking three bloodlines in this group of this Tartar Aryans. So we're talking about an older group that hooked up with the other even older group, and their bloodlines came in. So if they were cloning these Tartar Aryan kids and putting them on the orphan trains, and they were doing it in labs, but there were still some kids that were actual orphans of genuine womb births, right? Maybe this is where we got the silent generation from. Because if you have children outside of the womb, they don't go through the final process of childbirth, which is a recalibration of the energy field. And see, you can have children that are born really nervous and startle responses are high, is being born outside of the womb. There's an energetic integration cycle that happens right there. It converges everything, just kind of like going into that spiral that we've been talking about, going out of the circle, going into the spiral. So I wonder if these the people that have been born into this timeline, that this is what the difference is that we're being switched on to be, because we have this, that we're like multiplied a million different times all over here, that we're existing in non-playing characters. I mean, we are on other realms, right? You guys are probably remembering your timelines and other realities. Like I'm on Mars. I have a woman body there. I'm always astral traveling, and there's a very close parallel timeline that we're existing in right now. It's really nice. I hope we go to that one. And we're living on the beach, which I was like, oh, it dawned on me. I will be living on a beach when the rest of the planet shifts, right? The beach is going to come right up to my doorstep practically, because I live on Lake Walking Water, Central Florida Ridge. This was the only place that was above water. This is why they found so many artifacts here, is that this ridge goes on causes us to be really elevated because we got hit by a bunch of meteors in the past. We got hit by a bunch of meteors and they landed right where Bach Tower is. And the funny thing about that is that's 28 degree latitude by 28 degree or 82 longitude by 28 latitude. 28 by 28. X marks the spot. That's the node. And that's the primordial mother's. If you talk about Earth being her body, that's her solar plexus. That's the solar plexus of Earth. This is why the apocalyptic line is going through the 82 degree longitudinal line. And they have the four horsemen, or three of the four horsemen listed on that map. One's up by the Great Lakes. And a lot of people that are doing this work in this timeline are born in these areas too. Yeah, you're born with water codes. Yep. See, it's really interesting. We're all born with water coding. And you notice a lot of the kids that go missing, they're right around water communities because they're looking for codes in their blood. I'm so glad this channel's not monetized, because we wouldn't be able to have all these honest conversations right here for everyone to find, to go out into the field, right? See, this is why. Can't entangle truth with finances for profit. This doesn't work. Anybody that's charging self-help classes and all this stuff for you to get ascension, don't waste your money. None of the stuff will all be distorted. It'll be distorted in one way or another because it's entangled with the quantum field for the false timeline. But yes, everyone that's doing this work right now, you're either born with water codes or you're born with earth codes. Like a lot of people are born in the mountains and a lot of people are born around water. And, there's more kids that go missing in Texas, Florida, I think it's New York. But if you notice that there's water bodies around those, well, those are Atlantean codes. They're carrying water codes from Atlantis. So, just like all these kids from Mexico that they brought up through, they want to act like they're doing immigration, my ass. We know what you're really doing. You're harvesting. You're harvesting. You're picking kids that have Atlantean codes. And you also have to remember, they also have German codes because the Nazis went there after the First, Second World War. They went down to Argentina. So there's a lot of people in South America that have Tartar-Aryan coding. So let me just tell you, you're getting a bang for your buck there. Not only are you getting Tartar-Aryan, but you're also getting Atlantean water codes, right? Oh yeah, water codes, water codes. I have no idea what the missing children statistics are, but I have seen about all of that stuff that happened with Jimmy Savile or whatever his name is. I mean, talk about gross, man. He looks creepy. My God, Jimmy Savile. I'm like, good Lord. A lot of that business going on there too, right? It's just sick. It's anybody in power is compromised. Anybody in power. They're totally compromised. It's just a shame. It's a shame. But we have to prepare for this time. Like, everybody needs to get busy with putting a garden together because that's going to be really important. And the other thing is that we've really got to be mindful to be looking to the sky for the spraying because it's really bad. Like I'm building a greenhouse. Yeah, totally. Everybody's compromised. There's nobody but us, guys. There's nobody but us. If we don't help each other, we're never going to make it. That's all I got to say. I've seen the timeline. It's bad. I have people coming in my yard stealing my fruit off of my trees because they're starving. And it's literally like you're going to have a fence and an armed guard out there. I was like having my dog babysit my fruit trees in the timeline. Yeah, it was not good. Not a good timeline. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that if everybody can work together, people taking trips, they go into these sacred spots and they sit and hold place, there, give an offering, say some prayers. I mean, just doing that is lighting up these sacred nodes and reactivating them because you're carrying codes from, many, 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 many generations to get right here, right now to wake up. And they don't want us waking up. And that's the other thing is that I feel like the dimension is getting so thin. Yeah, the dimensions are getting so thin that they are like upping the spraying to the 9th degree. It's like there's just nothing but trails out here. And I something kept telling me, pull off the road, Stacy, pull off the road. You need to look at the sky. You need to record the sky. That's what I kept getting. And I'm like, I'll do it when I get home. Then I kept hearing, no, you need to pull over right now. So I pull over in my community down the road. I take out my phone and I'm looking at the sky and I'm just like so disappointed with the chemtrails everywhere. It just makes me sick. So I'm just videotaping it, right? And I turn around to pan around and I see a UFO. I'm like, oh, Hoppy. They were telling me to look in the sky. They were the ones that was telling me. They wanted me to catch them on my video camera, which I did. I tried to download it to my channel and they striked it. They wouldn't let me download it. They told me it was copyright because there was a Hall and Oates song playing in the background. Yeah, I think that, the spray, what it does is it cakes up your pineal gland. So you can't make contact with source. And so if the frequency bands are so close together right now where they're almost ready to merge, right? As long as they can keep that thick fog of alchemy chemicals there to keep us tampered down so we can't, create the connection or it's being sabotaged, they can reduce the amount of people that are being contacted. Because, your pineal gland is how you're getting these transmissions. So that's why I say that, for Lent, February For 10 days before the lunar solar new year, I'm going to do a Daniel diet. And it's going to be, I've already started putting it together, but it's going to be a list of melatonin rich foods. And the reason that is so you get your pineal gland is really getting nourished. And with cleaning up of the diet, they've been telling me about doing the Daniel diet for a while, but now I know that it's like really, really important that we prepare for February 17th in a spiritual cleanse, like seriously, in a spiritual way, like with our food, because it's going to be really important. People that are here as light workers, you need to really prep. And you know what? 10 days is not bad. We can sacrifice 10 days of not eating blood. We can sacrifice 10 days of really, really being able to clean up our pineal gland, get the sludge out, bump up our immune system where our pineal gland is more active if we're taking melatonin. But the best way to do it is through natural food. So I'm putting a little menu together that people just don't want to think about it because they got too many other things that they don't have to look up what food is good, what foods are this and that, and what you can put together. So I'm going to do that and try to do like a menu type thing that for every evening or whatever. And I became a vegetarian for a year after my brother died. I went on a year cleanse from blood. And that's when everything started happening. Literally 2 weeks into that fast of not eating blood, I had a mantis being pop in my kitchen. And I'm like, what? And before I could even say anything, my subconscious answered it to him. I had like no control over it. It was like somebody else was operating. It said, I'm not ready. And it didn't come out of it came out of my brain. And then he was gone just like that. Yes, absolutely. Lemon water is so good for you. I'm telling you what, so good for you. So yeah, that was the first thing. And then I started seeing mantis bugs all over my yard. I have never seen a mantis since I was in elementary school, like 45 years ago. I've seen a kid would bring a mantis bug to school or a walking stick. I've never seen one since. And then I just started seeing them everywhere on my porch, in my backyard. I'd be working in my garden. I see a mantis on the ground. I'd pick it up. And I'm like, okay, are these drones for the mantis? Are they looking and studying us to see if we're pieces of shit? Right? Something to think about, really, it is. There's all kind of drones. They're on birds and all kind of things. So, they are watching us. They are watching us from the higher dimensional space. This is an experiment. Drop these people in these avatar suits, wipe their brain, so they have no idea what they're doing. They just think that they woke up and then they get programmed. And so the whole idea of the game is for them to get through the programming, wake up, right? Wake up and then come out of the matrix. And then once the game's over, everything can go back to the way it was before, right? We can bring heaven back to earth. We're the red thread. We put on our wedding garment. We put our wedding garment on. We solved the game. But there's some people you're not going to wake up. Well, the thing is with the mantis is that they don't have the same perspective as we do because they don't have the emotional response that we do. That's what makes us different, because we have a real womb, a natural womb. So because we have a womb, we have empathy. We have built-in empathy into humanity. And these beings that don't have bodies, they just have light bodies. They don't understand. They don't have empathy that we do. This is what makes humans beautiful because, well, they call it our creativity. Our love, our Venus expression. They've been around so long, they're basically, they're in a different headspace, just like the ones that eat humans. They eat us. I mean, they have a different perspective. Like, we didn't think about eating that cow. We didn't think about the cow's feelings or that it was a mother or anything. So, I mean, they probably think the same thing about us, They're and we don't, and most people don't remember who they are anyway, right? So they're like, these people, they have no idea what they're doing. They're ignorant or they're violent. That's one of the things they say about us, is that we're extremely violent. So maybe this has been going on so long with them dealing with us being violent that, you know, they kind of got a preconceived notion of us too. So maybe that's why they observe us to say, hey, are all these humans the same way? Or are there some that are different? Like if they come in with these codes, if they come in with these DNA codes, does that change their expression? Maybe they need to remodify the human body, right? Maybe it needs to have an upgrade. This is why they do the resets. That old prototype wasn't working out. Well, let's try doing a little swappy. We'll put this one with this one and see what we get. And they did a lot of that. I mean, they were combining archetypes, right? So if you think about it, the very first archetypes were probably quite basic because they were singular. It was a singularity. And so then they decided to hybridize those archetypes and say, hey, you know what? I got this expression that's like super energy. So I'm manifesting like as a dragon. But, you know, I need some direction. You know, I need this. So they would take this archetype, the bird being, and they would put the bird being in with the dragon being, and they put their expressions together. And then you got this dragon bird, you know, and then you needed, this bird was so observant that it forgot to be protective or it forgot to have structure. So they were like, well, we need some lion energy here. So they bring that in, that rigid structure. And boy, I tell you what, it just kind of went off the rails. I mean, sex did mess a lot of things up. It really did. This is why they had clans. When after they had the reset, they all got clans because they were all migrating into these bands, these 30, 60-degree bands, so they could survive. So they all migrated into these bands, and they were like, all right, we've already seen what happens when you have sex with your sister and you keep having kids. Yes, exactly. The phoenix, the bird, yes. And that phoenix also gets a contract for cycles, and this is usually when it's a high action event on Earth. You know, when you've got big change cycles coming, you always go from the Phoenix event. And that's one of the great things that Jason at Archetypes talks about, is he really breaks down what these events are. And then if you talk about these events, you really got to look at Jessie Sabodar's information, because the interesting thing that she shows is she breaks down what all these contracts are and stuff on the flip side. So if you can figure out what it is that they're doing in this timeline, then pretty much everything's the opposite, right? Everything's the opposite. So, I mean, I've pretty much come to realize that it's all about archetypes and going into the 13th archetype, because otherwise we just stay in a 12 by 12 system. So we have to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps, and we have to help each other. So the 20% is going to have to help the other 20%, and we're going to have to ride the wave. Oh yeah, she has some interesting stuff. If you look at this, the one that she does where she talks about the symbols, or she has a castle thumbnail on there, where she's on Aquarius Africa, Aquarius Rising Africa with Chantil Meyerberg. Chantil, she's the 13th archetype too. She's got serpent coating on her eye. She's got like a double snake bite on her left eye, which means she's here to see primordial mother, right? She got her serpent coating, initiation mark. Yeah. And then she has like moles on her neck. And I'm like, I know what she's here for. She's here for the 13th archetype. And she's African, right? Because these are old bloodlines. And that's the other thing, is that you've got this group, the French people that were in Africa a long time ago. They were called the Mansa Musa. And, you know, in the early days in America, my great-grandmother told my dad, because my dad was raised by his grandmother, Emma Jane Randolph. She told my dad that there were Black Irish people here, Black French, and Black Dutch. So that means that these people were Tartar Aryans. So they were in Africa, but they've been called the Moors. They've been called that. These are all mother's children that they were Tartar Aryans. They were Tartar Aryans. And then I found some letters that were written to Thomas Jefferson, because Thomas Jefferson is a Randolph. He got these letters from this man named John Ledyard that said that he'd been looking for the Tartars, and that he said that being out west and being all over the world and comparing history to what he was actually seeing with his eyes, that about everyone that he's seen, with the exception of Africa, but he would ganter that it would be, but he hadn't been there yet, that all of these people belong to one group that you would call the Tartars. So, the Tartars were the dark-skinned people. They were dark-skinned people, and they came from an earlier timeline. And it's crazy because so many people care about who was here first and who was here not. What does it difference? It makes no difference now. We have to be in the 13th archetype, right? All this other stuff is just distractions. So I've been on here at 6 o'clock, so I've got to feed my dogs, guys. I just wanted to come on here and see if anybody had any questions, and if if you guys have anything that you want to talk about before we end the chat here. Well, Karen, if I don't see you on the channel before your birthday, have a happy birthday. I just downloaded the video, and I've got to just post it on the channel, but I got to put his links and stuff on there. I'm looking for my mouse. I have no idea where it's at, and I need it to, it's stored in my computer. I usually just use my phone. So, yeah, I'm going to try to get it posted first thing in the morning. But I put his link and stuff on the community, so everybody could go look at his page beforehand. He has a lot of stuff written on there already. Like, he's done 5, probably more than that. He said he did 5, but he's written like 5 books, and it's a big study too. It goes off into Tesla, it goes off into cloning. That cloning stuff is a lot. I've been trying to read Hack of Darwin this week, trying to prepare to have a conversation with him that I wasn't completely abreast on. I didn't want to sound like a fool, because he knows a lot about cloning. So, yeah, I mean, there's some nefarious stuff going on with cloning right now. They're trying to build these databases. Oh, my gosh. Of bioengineering labs. I mean, just all kind of stuff that I've been reading in this book. And that if you choose to get IVF, that it's free in Israel, that they'll pay for your IVF. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Oh, well, are you surprised, right? I'm not making anybody any money, so it's not going to get pushed into the algorithm. But, that's why I say we have to share the channel. We have to share the channel, and we have to make sure people are subscribing, because I have a lot of traffic on the videos. Like, they get forwarded a lot, but it never really comes back to the channel unless you look at the stats, right? I've seen that a lot of people are looking at the material, but they're not subscribing. They're not giving a like. It's not pushing it into the algorithm. Oh, yeah. Everything is just programming. These people are born into the system just for what they do. They're complete characters. Every one of them is a fabrication. Even everyone in our political arena. They were all grown from the beginning. They've started in these bloodlines. They were set up believing that they're here to do this and that. They're groomed for it their whole life. I mean, they're characters on a stage. Just like, I'm starting to wonder, was Charlie... I mean, he was a character, but do you think that he would have imagined that he was married to a Rothschild? I wonder if he found out that before the end, and that's what happened to him, right? He was like, oh shit, I'm married to a handler and she's a Rothschild, right? Because she said herself, if you want to have a guy named like Charlie, you got to be a Charlie kind of girl, right? So she made herself into the kind of girl that would attract a Charlie. Yeah. So, I mean, but, I did a video. I did a video like the day after that. And I broke down all of the sacrificial geometry on there, and I've seen dozens and dozens and dozens of videos that talk about all the stuff I put on my channel, and not one person says, I learned this from watching our channel. And I'm like, people got to know about what's going on in the planet. Just because this is not a monetized channel, they shouldn't just, thumb it down or, overlook the material. The content is not distorted in the field because it's not going to be monetarily entangled. So I'm not compromising our channel. So we're going to have to push the work ourselves, and everything that we can contribute. And if you guys ever want to come on the channel and do an interview and tell your story, let me know. I've already asked you, friend. So I've already asked you, and I hope that you will. You can put on one of those fedora hats and a disguise, one of those noses with the mustache, right? And you, Karen, too. All right. Well, I'm going to let you guys go for the evening. Thanks for dropping in. See you guys soon.